Hey guys, my name is Ryan Burgoyne, and this is my Democratic Peace Research Note for Politics 220 with Dr. Brian Erlacher. Today we're just going to be going over, do Democratic states tend to align themselves with other Democratic states more often than non-Democratic states? And the goal here is just to kind of see if there is a relationship between democratically structured states and who they align themselves with. And, my initial thought coming from a psychology perspective is yes, democratic states are going to align themselves more often with democratic states just because, they're like-minded, they share common beliefs, values, ideology, whatever. And their relationships are going to tend to last longer just because, they think alike and they are like-minded. But we're going to jump into the balance of power theory here that explains why states tend to align with each other. In an article, Who's Afraid of a Balance of Power by Stephen Walt, he goes on to state that, there is no world government, so when you're facing a powerful state or problem, weaker countries tend to align themselves with each other to, face this country or face this powerful state or danger or problem or whatever. And you can see examples of this in the 20th century in regards to the U.S. Take World War II for an example. The U.S. aligns themselves with Great Britain and France, who are both democratic states, but also with the Soviet Union, which is a non-democratic state. And they do this in order to keep Nazi Germany from becoming too powerful. And the U.S.'s alliance with the Soviet Union tends to break not long after World War II. Again, one is a democracy and the other is not, and they just don't see eye to eye with each other. And Walt again states here that he suggests that democratic alliances are somewhat more stable than alliances between, democracies and non-democracies or two non-democratic states. And how I kind of went on to test if democratic states tend to align themselves more often with democratic states is I looked at a website called freedomhouse.com, which just lists every country and their freedom levels on a score of 1 to 100, with 100 being the most free. And I decided that countries who scored a score of over 50 are democratic, and countries who scored a score of 49 or below non-democratic. And after, kind of listing all these countries out, I took a look at what countries are in alliances with each other and what countries are not in alliances with each other. And after getting all that data into a graph, I entered all that data into a chi-square test, and I got a chi-square value of 5.6 with a p-value of 0.0184, and the p-value is going to be significant here because it is less than 0.05, which means we can reject the null hypothesis of no relationship of who democratic states tend to align themselves with, which, after looking at the graph, you can see when both countries are democratic, there's an 87.5% chance that they are allies. And when you look at two countries who are, maybe one is democratic and one is not democratic, or both are non-democratic, they're only going to be in an alliance 41.2% of the time. And that's a huge gap in numbers to me. Obviously, there are not many countries that fit into this, this graph of both democracies and allies, or not both democracies and allies, or not allies. So I didn't have a huge field to work with here, but the numbers are nonetheless surprising, and that p-value, which allows us to reject the null hypothesis, is another big point here, stating that, there is kind of a trend here between who democratic states align themselves with, and, they do tend to align themselves more often with other democratic states. And that outcome is something that I expected and explained in the beginning a little bit about how just my background from psychology kind of gave me a little bit of foreshadowing. Obviously you can kind of assume, anyone can kind of assume that like-minded people are going to work well with each other. But after, collecting all this information and data and entering it into this chi-square test and getting all these numbers, and doing these calculations, you can kind of, you can see with hard evidence that, yes, these democratic countries are aligning themselves more often with other democratic countries, and those alliances are also lasting. And, well, that answers that question. Thank you guys for listening, and enjoy the rest of your week.